Today, Republic Act II. And what I want to do is continue with the account of the various figures, various persons who populate, who inhabit this dialogue, and who they are, what they represent, and how they contribute to the argument and the structure of the work as a whole. Last time, and I won't repeat this, last time you remember we talked briefly at the end of class about Cephalus and Socrates' treatment of Cephalus, the embodiment of convention, the embodiment of Athenian opinion, and the way in which Socrates, as it were, chases Cephalus out of the dialogue, out of the conversation. We never hear from him again, and the speakers are able, presumably, to pursue the audacious arguments that will appear in the rest of the book without the oversight of the head of the household, the embodiment of conventional opinion. And Socrates next pursues this discussion with the son of Cephalus, Polemarchus, the man who first had Socrates approached on the Piraeus. Polemarchus is described as the heir of the argument, as well as to be sure, the heir of the family fortune. Polemarchus is what the Greeks would call a gentleman. That is to say, he's a person willing to stand up for and defend his family and friends. I don't mean necessarily by a gentleman somebody who holds the door for others or so on, but somebody who stands up for his family and friends in the way that he does. Unlike his father, however, Polemarchus shows himself concerned not just with the needs of the body, as Cephalus is represented, but Polemarchus is concerned to defend the honor and safety of the polis. He accepts the view that justice is giving to each what is owed, but he interprets this to mean that justice means doing good to your friends and harm to your enemies. Justice, we might say, is a kind of loyalty. It is a kind of loyalty that we feel to members of a family, to members of our team, to fellow students of a residential college, and the kind of loyalty we feel to a place like Yale as opposed to all other places. That is to say, Polemarchus understands justice as a kind of patriotic sentiment that citizens of one city or one polis feel for one another in opposition to all other places. Justice is devotion to one's own, and one's own is the good for Polemarchus. One's own is the just. But Socrates challenges Polemarchus on the grounds that loyalty to a group, any group, cannot be a virtue in itself. And he trips Polemarchus up with a very, in many ways, familiar Socratic argument. Do we ever make mistakes? He asks Polemarchus. Isn't the distinction between friend and enemy based on a kind of knowledge, on a perception of who is your friend and who is your enemy? Have we ever mistaken friend for enemy? The answer seems to be, of course we have. We all know people who we thought to be our friends, but we found out, that they were talking behind our backs, or that they were operating to deceive us, or in some way or another. Of course, it happens. It's happened to everyone. So how can we say that justice means helping friends and harming enemies, Socrates asks, when we may not even be sure who our friends and our enemies really are? Why should citizens of one state, namely one's own, have any moral priority over the citizens of another state, when, again, we don't know them, and we may well be mistaken in our assumption that they are enemies or friends? Isn't, in other words, such an unreflective attachment to one's own bound to result in injustice to others? Socrates seems to be asking Polemarchus. Once again, in many ways, we see Socrates dissolving the bonds of the familiar. At no other point in the Republic, I think, do we see so clearly the tension between philosophical reflectiveness on the one hand and the sense of camaraderie, mutuality, and esprit de corps necessary for political life on the other. Socrates seems to dissolve those bonds of familiarity, loyalty, and attachment that we all have by saying to Polemarchus, how do we know, how do we really know distinction between friend and enemy? But Polemarchus seems to believe that a city can survive only with a vivid sense of what it is, of what we might say, what it stands for, and an equally vivid sense of what it is not and who are its enemies. Isn't this essential for the survival of any state, of any city, to know who its friends and enemies are, who its challengers are? Socrates' dissolution of that very framework challenges, it seems to me, the very possibility of political life by questioning the question or the distinction between friend and enemy. Although Polemarchus, like his father, is reduced to silence, it is notable that his argument is not defeated. Later in the Republic, you will see, not that much later even, Socrates will argue that the best city may be characterized by peace and harmony at home, but this will never be so for relations between states. This is why even the best city, even Callipolis, will require, as he spends a great deal of time discussing, will require a warrior class, a class of what he calls auxiliaries. Auxiliaries. War and the preparation for war is an intrinsic part of even the most just city. Even the Platonic just city will have to cultivate warrior citizens who are prepared to risk life in battle for the sake of their own city. So in many ways, it seems that Polemarchus' argument, while apparently refuted in Book 1, is rehabilitated and reemerges in its own way later in the dialogue. And we might want to think about this because it is an argument that is very important to a contemporary or 20th century, important 20th century political theorist by the name of Schmidt, who made the distinction between what he called the friend and the enemy, right? You remember this, central to his understanding of politics. This is an argument that comes from Polemarchus in Book 1 of the Republic. Polemarchus is dispatched in one way or another. And this creates the opportunity for the longest and, in many ways, most memorable exchange in Book 1, and perhaps even the Republic as a whole, the exchange with Thrasymachus, who represents a far more difficult challenge in his own way than either of the first two speakers. In many ways, because Thrasymachus could be seen as Socrates' alter ego in some way, his sort of evil twin. He is, how to put it, he is the Dr. Moriarty to Socrates' Sherlock Holmes, the evil doppelganger in some way. Thrasymachus is a rival of Socrates in many respects. He also, like Socrates, is a teacher, clearly. He is an educator. He claims to have a certain kind of knowledge of what justice is and claims to be able to teach it to others. He is teaching a kind of, we will find out, a kind of hard-headed realism that expresses disgust at Polemarchus' talk about loyalty and friendship and the like. Justice, he asserts, is the interest of the stronger. Every polity of which we know is based upon a distinction between the rulers and the ruled. Justice consists of the rules, that is to say, that are made by and for the benefits of the ruling class. Justice is nothing more or less, right, than what benefits the rulers who determine the laws of justice. Thrasymachus is, of course, even for us today, a familiar kind of person. He is the intellectual. He who enjoys bringing, you might say, the harsh and unremitting facts about human nature to light, who enjoys dispelling illusions and pretty beliefs. He's the one who probably would be the first to tell you there is no Santa Claus. He is that kind of hard-boiled realist. No matter how much we may dislike him in some ways, one has to admit also there may be a grain, if not more than a grain, of truth in what he seems to be saying. And what he seems to be saying is this: we are beings who are first and foremost dominated by a desire for power. This is what distinguishes, you might say, the true man, the real man, from the alpha male, you might say, from the slave. Power and domination are all we truly care about. And when we get later in the semester to Thomas Hobbes, remember Thrasymachus. I'll just say that for now. Remember Thrasymachus when we get to Hobbes. Power and domination are all we care about. And what is true of individuals